Hello, History 363. So back to the First Punic War. So we left off. Hostilities have broken out. The Romans have sent two consular armies into Sicily. The Carthaginians have countered by sending an army of over 50,000 men into Sicily. The first years of the war go very well for the Romans. In 263, the Romans force Syracuse to surrender. As part of the deal, the Syracusans not only give the Romans a large 100 talent payment in silver, they also promise to provide grain for Roman armies. And this is going to allow the Romans logistically to continue to operate with forces in Sicily. In 362, the Romans capture a key strategic location of Agrimentum on the sort of southern coast of Sicily. And this is going to be a really important Roman base as they start operating inland towards the eastern portion, threatening the traditional Carthaginian holdings in the island. However, while Roman armies are extremely successful on Sicily in the first really 2+ years of the war, there is a problem. The Carthaginians control the sea. And this means, A, that the Carthaginians can continue to supply their armies, their forces in eastern Sicily by a steady stream of supplies and money and reinforcements that are flowing through the big Carthaginian base on eastern Sicily called Lilybaeum. It also means that the Romans are going to always have to be slipping across the Strait of Rhegion anytime they want to introduce reinforcements, supplies, money. And so if the Romans are really going to get serious about beating the Carthaginians, obtaining true military dominance over Sicily, they're going to have to build a navy, a large fleet. Now, the Romans, Polybius presents us with a story of the Romans being completely naive about naval warfare, and then in a fit of industry and focus, rapidly constructing a fleet. They're building the boats, but they've got to train the crews, and so sort of putting out benches, making kind of fake boats, so that rowers can learn how to row on land while they actually wait for their boats to be built. Now, I think Polybius' story is at least partly true. The Romans go from are building huge fleets, 100+ warships, in a relatively short period of time, which does mean the need to rapidly train crews for this operation. However, there's actually a lot of evidence that the Romans have had small fleets for some time and are not unfamiliar with naval warfare. Indeed, if you remember, one of the triggers to the Punic Wars had been a Roman fleet sailing into Tarentum and being attacked by the Tarentines. So the Romans don't have a big navy, but there clearly are some people in central Italy who know a thing or two about boats, whether it's captains, helmsmen, bosuns, and can help to be a kind of cadre that can train a larger fleet. Still, I think Polybius is basically right. It's an impressive achievement, the speed at which the Romans throw together a fleet. Now, the Romans probably do realize that they have one significant weakness, and that is, naval warfare. The primary way that naval warfare in the Mediterranean is traditionally done is you have your warship. The main weapon of that warship is a ram. The ram actually attaches to the end of the keel, and you use that bronze ram to try to maneuver into enemy warships and smash them and sink them. That's the primary modality of warfare. But in order to do this successfully, you have to have really well-trained crews, able to do complex maneuvers so that you can actually get in a position to destroy an enemy ship. The favorite maneuver, actually one the Athenians are really good at. The Athenians have really well-trained crews in the 5th century. It's called a diakplus. That is, you're sailing towards your enemy, both are kind of about to hit head on. At the last minute, you need a well-trained crew for this. One side breaks off, sails around the other side, does a hard button hook turn. Again, you need well-trained rowers to do this, and then smashes into the stern of the opposing ship at its most vulnerable place and ideally sinks it. that takes people who really know what they're doing. And the Romans maybe early on acknowledge that's not us. We're not quite that good yet. And so the Romans come up with a kind of solution to the fact that we're still learning how to maneuver and fight on the sea. We still have relatively untrained oarsmen and crews. They say, well, what are we good at? And the thing that the Romans are good at is, incidentally, land warfare. Coming at people with shields and swords and spears and killing them. So the Roman solution is a technological solution. It's equipping their ships with a boarding gangplank. They call it corvus, which means raven in Latin. And essentially what it is, it's a ramp that usually is kept in an up position. But as the Romans can come aside an enemy warship, rather than trying to do a lot of complex maneuvers to get around and ram it, they simply try to pull up, swing down the corvus, and this creates a gangplank that allows them to send armed soldiers, what we would call marines, although the Romans don't necessarily have a strict separation between who's a soldier and who's a soldier who serves at sea. But soldiers on each ship, and the Romans are putting as many as 120 soldiers on each warship, can now swarm across this gangplank and capture the enemy ship by boarding it. So the Romans, therefore, know what they're weak at, but take advantage of what they're good at. So this is how the Romans are equipping their first fleet. It scores some big victories early on. So at the Battle of Mylae in 360, the Romans managed to severely smash a Carthaginian fleet and inflict heavy losses. This victory is celebrated by the erection of a column, a naval column, by the successful Roman general Gaius Duilius, in which he brags about the victory, the money and prisoners that he's paraded. Duilius, incidentally, is a new man. So he is a plebeian, probably the first member of his family, although our prosopography of this period isn't great, but likely the first member of his family to be a consul, and now he's celebrating this big naval win that he's achieved with this monument in Rome. The Romans subsequently defeat Carthage again quite badly in 256 BC at the Battle of Ecnomus. Here the Romans actually start using more complex tactics, a sign that maybe they're becoming somewhat more comfortable with the nuances of naval warfare, in that they deploy their fleet into sort of three parts, but basically create a giant arrow that sort of a wedge with another sort of line behind, and so that the sort of the wedge can smash through the Carthaginian fleet, and then the remaining line, who the Romans call the triarii, as if this were a legion, can come and kind of mop up the remaining Carthaginian ships. So here we see sort of sophisticated naval grand tactics, and it is successful. The Romans win another smashing victory. And then they get a little overconfident. In 255, they decide that they are going to land a consular army in Africa, with the intention of probably trying to end the war once and for all with an invasion of Carthage itself. Now, the Carthaginians, we're told, are in a state of crisis. They weren't expecting their navy to get savaged like it has been over the past 5 years. And while they have an army that is mostly mercenaries in Sicily, they don't particularly have a large force in Africa. So they hire as many mercenaries as they can, and they also hire a mercenary general to lead it, a Spartan mercenary named Xanthippus. And this army confronts the army of the Roman consul Atilius Regulus outside of Tunis. And this is actually the first kind of battle that we have for the Roman battle, that we actually kind of have a good sense of what's going on. That Polybius gives us a battle narrative that is quite likely reliable. The Romans are really worried, or Regulus is really worried about the fact that the Carthaginians have elephants. I mean, the Romans remember that Pyrrhus's elephants, which they faced over a decade ago, were really dangerous. And so he responds probably in a not very good way. He responds by stacking his army, his legion, much deeper than ordinarily. Probably by, rather than having the centuries fight side by side, they fight stacked up on top of one another. So his forces are therefore sort of very deep. And this fact kind of negates the advantage of the Romans have in that they may have slightly more infantry than the Carthaginians. The Romans, however, attack. They are successful, actually, in fighting against the mercenaries, but the Carthaginian citizens do quite well against the Romans, and ultimately we're told that the Carthaginian elephants really disrupted and hampered the Roman formation, while the Carthaginian cavalry on either side manages to achieve an envelopment of the overly deep and therefore not as long Roman line. And this leads to a total disaster. The army is enveloped, most of it is wiped out. A few thousand survivors are evacuated out of Africa by the fleet, and yet that fleet then gets hit by a storm and a lot of the ships sink. Regulus himself is captured, and we're told that he is tortured to death by the Carthaginians, possibly by denying him the ability to sleep or putting him in some kind of Iron Maiden-style device. So 255, we have the destruction of a consular army in Africa, and we have the loss of actually really two separate Roman fleets due to storms nearly simultaneously. And this is a total and complete disaster that completely sets back the Romans. The Carthaginians counterattack in Sicily. They briefly recapture Agrigentum. And for the first time, it looks like that maybe the Romans will sort of win in the sense that they still got Syracuse and they still have a footprint in eastern Sicily, which they didn't have in 264, but that the Carthaginians might be successful in retaining a large sphere of influence over much of western Sicily. Now, the Romans continue to maintain their armies in Sicily, but they do not, they actually hold off against building a new fleet. Perhaps it seems the people are angry that this huge, expensive fleet that they spent a lot of money to build has been largely lost, not even to the enemy, but to storms. In 249, so 6 years pass, the Romans decide to build a new fleet. It is put under the command of one Appius Claudius Pulcher, and it confronts the Carthaginian fleet off of Drepana off the coast of eastern Sicily. Again, the Romans are trying to intercept the Carthaginian supply line that runs from Carthage and Africa more broadly to Lilybaeum. This battle turns out to be a total disaster. The Roman explanation for the loss is that Appius Claudius fails in the religious aspects of his command. So a key aspect of a Roman general is to help maintain the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, and to figure out through the taking of auspices, and indeed a closely associated power that comes with imperium. Imperium is kind of the secular power to punish soldiers with floggings and execution even, but also with imperium comes auspicium, which is actually the right to take auspices and see if the gods approve of your actions today. So before a Roman general fights a battle, he has to check in with the gods and say, are you guys cool if I fight a battle today? And the ritual with which he does this is through using sacred chickens. So there are special chickens that have special chicken keepers, and if they're given food, and if they eat before a battle, it's a sign that the gods want you to fight this battle, and that means you're more than likely to win. If they don't eat, the gods are sending you a polite message saying this is probably not a good time to fight a battle, hold off. Now, can this form of prediction, divination, be manipulated? Hell yes, it can. If you want to fight a battle, if you're like, this is the right time to fight, our armies are ready, the enemy is vulnerable, let's attack, you starve those chickens for a couple of days and they'll eat. However, poor Appius Claudius Pulcher, the chickens won't eat, and he wants to fight a battle. And supposedly, of course, the Claudii, the patrician family, have this family reputation for being extraordinarily arrogant. Supposedly, Appius Claudius Pulcher says, well, if they won't eat, let them drink, and has them thrown off the side of the ship. Did he do this? Hard to say. Maybe this is a story that gets told after the horrific defeat takes place. Suffice it to say, the Romans lose the battle and lose it badly. The fleet is crushed. Appius Claudius Pulcher is eventually prosecuted, and they also prosecute his sister, because his arrogant sister has the gall one day after the battle. She's being carried through the streets of Rome, and the streets of Rome are very crowded, and she supposedly says, "There are too many people in this darn city. I wish my brother would lose a couple more battles." Remember, the people who are rowing these ships are the proletarii, many of whom are kind of the poorer people who live in Rome, who don't have a plot of land and live in the countryside. So they're the ones rowing the ships, and they're the ones who he says, I just wish he would take all these people, put in the fleet, and sink them too. She is fined for this comment tried by the Roman people and fined. They do not appreciate, they don't find it very funny at all. And also a sign of how popular popular regulation can keep the aristocrats, at least to a degree, in check. One other thing the Roman people will not approve is any more fleets being built, because the Romans are truly baroque. And so again, the war is therefore kind of at a stalemate. It's now 249. The Romans aren't going to build another fleet for 7 more years. There's another break in the building the navy that the Romans deep down know that they need if they're going to truly crush the Carthaginians. Although they still keep sending armies to Sicily and keep facing off in eastern Sicily, where they've actually improved their position somewhat after the dark days after the Battle of Tunis, after the defeat of Regulus in 255. They've actually taken back a lot of eastern Sicily. So they actually kind of have the Carthaginians land-wise pinned up around Lilybaeum. But again, as long as the Carthaginians keep getting supplies, they can keep their army there and they can maintain their position in eastern Sicily. And the Romans don't have the navy to stop that. Now, the Carthaginians, who of course aren't totally happy with being pinned up in eastern Sicily, pinned up in western Sicily. I've said eastern, western Sicily. They're pinned up in the western part of the island. The Carthaginians aren't terribly happy with this, and they send a new and energetic commander, and that commander is named Hamilcar. He not only sort of tries to improve the Carthaginian position, but he also launches a number of seaborne raids against Italy. I mean, in some ways, what he's trying to do is say, hey, look, this is a stalemate, but I'm going to make this stalemate hurt for you. These raids, suffice to say, backfire. The Romans, for the first time, realize, hey, we got to get another fleet on the water because Carthaginian raiders are now harassing and terrorizing the coasts of Italy. And so in 242, the Romans decide to build a new fleet. But there is the problem, how to pay for it. Rome, at this point, has an incredibly archaic and primitive currency system. So a couple of times I've talked about the denarius as a Roman coin. Denarius actually doesn't exist yet. The denarius won't be minted until around 214 BC at the earliest. The Romans still have a currency system that involves huge lumps of bronze, either big bars of bronze or coins, and the coin is called an ass, which is actually just Latin for bronze, that is cast bronze coins. That is, rather than being sort of poured and then stamped, you're actually filling a cask with a huge amount of bronze. The ass weighs 1 Roman pound, which is for us about 12 ounces. But that's a huge, heavy coin. So when Roman soldiers get paid at this point, they're getting paid these huge, big chunks of bronze. It's an incredibly primitive system, and it's a really clumsy system to fund a large, complex expeditionary army and navy. And it's clear that the Roman system of tributum at this point, collecting, again, big chunks of bronze from the Roman citizen body, is probably extraordinarily strained by the requirements of this war. So how are the Romans going to fund a fleet in 242? They basically hold a bake sale. I mean, they by subscription, wealthy Romans agree to bring money down and put up funds for the fleet. And that is how they are able to finally fund a new fleet, which hits the water in 241 BC. Bad news for the Carthaginians. They are caught completely by surprise. Indeed, there's some evidence that suggests the Carthaginians have kind of put a lot of their fleet in dry dock, other than just whatever they need to keep the army supplied. And therefore, they are very unprepared when a large, well-equipped Roman fleet starts sailing for western Sicily. They therefore decide that they're going to scramble together all of the ships that they can, and they've laden these with supplies, probably basically do an emergency resupply, to realize that, hey, this Roman fleet could disrupt supplies, but let's get as many supplies as we can to Lilybaeum in one big convoy, escorted by all the ships that we can put onto the water. Many ships in this fleet are quite likely Roman ships that were captured at the Battle of Drepana in 249 and have now been repurposed as Carthaginian ships. So this huge armed resupply convoy, therefore, is moving towards Sicily. And the Romans, who know it's coming, set up an ambush. They hide their fleet behind the Aegetes Islands, the modern-day Gaudy Islands off the coast of Sicily, and then they pounce, and there is a huge battle, and the Romans win. And this battle, which now severs finally the supply line between Carthage and Lilybaeum, decisively ends the war. Now, one of the most exciting archaeological discoveries of the past, frankly, generation is related to this battle. That is, starting around 2011, underwater archaeologists in a really well-financed and well-managed excavation started bringing up the rams, the naval rams from this battle. So the ship is made out of wood, but it has a bronze ram. The bronze ram will not decay in seawater, unlike, say, iron. Also, things that won't decay in seawater, the bronze helmet. Iron rusts away, but bronze is quite stable. So they started pulling up naval rams, and they also started pulling up helmets, bronze helmets, in addition to amphora and ballast stone. The amphora and ballast stone all can be linked geologically to Africa. So this seems to be the supplies, and then the ballast stone around the ballast for the ships coming from Africa. The rams are mostly Roman. That's sort of one surprise, given that the battle was a smashing Roman victory. All of this, with the exception of one right now, and they keep bringing them up, so this video is already probably dated. But almost all the rams are Roman. And this probably actually ties into the fact that many of the Carthaginian ships are repurposed, captured Roman ships. And that explains why almost all the ships sunk were Roman. It was Romans in their ships attacking Carthaginians in captured Roman ships. One big surprise, and this actually goes to thinking about, how do we know what we know? We rely on the narrative of the First Punic War that I've just given you is heavily derived from Polybius. And Polybius is kind of the gold standard for ancient historians. I mean, if you had to rank the quality of ancient historians, Polybius is way up there with, say, Thucydides in terms of, how much faith we put in him. There's a lot of reason to believe that Polybius is generally giving us good information. But one thing that Polybius tells us is that all of the ships that the Romans have been building are very large ships called quinqueremes, or fives. And they're called fives because on each bank of oars, there's three levels of oars. So it's not like there's 5 levels of oars, but there's 3 levels of oars. The first 2 levels have 2 oarsmen per oar, so they put more power onto the oar. And there's one guy at the lowest level, and that's a really miserable place to be because you got 4 guys stacked right up in front of you, and their behinds are right in your face. So 5 rowers per bank, and therefore those ships require about 300 rowers, and they're also bigger ships. And so we would expect, we kind of have a sense of how big a quinquereme was. What surprised a lot of naval archaeologists was the rams that they started bringing up were quite tiny. They were probably rams that would fit on the end of a small trireme, which only has 3 rowers, 1 on each of those levels of oars. So Polybius tells us the Romans were from an early date building big quinquereme warships for the First Punic War. And indeed, when he gives us the size of fleets, he will say something like, well, the Romans had 350 ships and they had 300 rowers per ship. And that tells you, look at the size of that fleet. We now find these very small rams that makes us suggest that Polybius is may be mistaken. The Romans are largely operating small triremes, and maybe the Carthaginians are too. So Polybius sort of wants this war to be a clash of titans, of these huge warships, which were quite common in Polybius's day. The quinquereme is the dominant warship of Polybius's day. It seems that the First Punic War may have been a little more of a sort of clash of frigates. Even so, the result of the First Punic War is Carthage is forced to evacuate from its forces from Sicily. Rome, therefore, has hegemony over the entire island, although Syracuse and other Greek city-states exist in the east as still independent states. Rome theoretically, therefore, administers eastern Sicily, although it's unclear that they will actually send administrators until the 220s BC. But this is nonetheless radically rehauls what Sicilian geopolitics looks like. It is a radical fall from power for Carthage, previously since the 6th century, the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. And while difficult and bloody and prolonged and at times stalemated, ultimately Rome's first overseas war ends with a resounding victory. So next time we'll talk about the interwar years and the lead up to the Second Punic War.